Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Tonight's story carries us far from the modern world to a quieter and more demanding time. We are stepping into the Middle Ages, not the grand halls and legends often imagined, but the simple, everyday life of an ordinary village and the people who worked its fields. This is a place shaped by seasons rather than clocks, where days are measured by light, weather, and routine. If you find yourself returning to these stories, you're welcome to support the channel in whatever way feels right to you. And if you wish, you may share in the comments where you are listening from and what time of day or night has brought you here. Many find comfort in knowing others are listening alongside them. Now, allow the lights to soften, let the world around you grow quiet, and make yourself comfortable. There is nowhere you need to go, and nothing you need to do. As you listen, imagine yourself drifting gently backward in time until the modern world fades away entirely. Tonight, you awaken in a small medieval village in the early years of the 14th century.
The darkness of my cottage begins to soften in that peculiar way it does before dawn, when night has not yet surrendered, but day sends its first tentative messengers. I lie still beneath my wool blanket, watching the single window transform from black to deepest blue, then to a shade lighter still. The air holds that particular coolness that belongs only to the hours before sunrise, crisp and clean, untouched by the warmth that will come later. My body knows this moment well, this daily threshold between rest and waking, and I rise without hurry, my feet finding the packed earth floor with the certainty of long habit. The cottage is small, as all our cottages are, with walls of wattle and daub that have weathered many seasons. My bed occupies one corner, a simple frame with rope supports and a straw mattress that I refresh each autumn after harvest. Against the opposite wall stands my table, rough-hewn but sturdy, and beside it the hearth where embers from last night's fire still glow faintly in the gathering light. I move toward these embers, my movements slow and deliberate, and kneel to coax them back to life. The kindling catches easily, small flames licking upward, and I add larger pieces of wood, watching as the fire strengthens and begins to push back the morning chill. The growing firelight dances across the cottage walls, illuminating my few possessions with warm, flickering shadows. There is my wooden chest where I keep my extra tunic and my winter cloak, my tools hanging from pegs driven into the wall beams, my water bucket beside the door, and on a shelf near the hearth, my wooden bowls and cups, my small store of salt, and the loaf of bread I baked 3 days ago. Everything has its place, everything familiar and necessary, nothing excessive or ornamental. This simplicity brings me comfort, a sense of order that mirrors the natural rhythms outside my door. I break off a piece of bread, its crust still reasonably firm despite its age, and pour ale from my jug into a wooden cup. The ale is good, brewed by the widow Margaret who lives near the mill, traded for a portion of my grain last month. I eat standing by the fire, chewing slowly, feeling the bread and ale settle warmly in my belly. Through the window, the sky continues its transformation, the blue deepening into something richer, more luminous, and I know the sun will soon break the horizon. This knowledge, born of countless mornings, fills me with quiet anticipation. When I have finished my simple meal, I pull on my work tunic, the fabric worn soft from many washings, and lace my leather boots, checking that the ties are secure. I take my wooden staff from beside the door, not because I need it for walking, but because it is useful for many tasks throughout the day, and step out into the morning. The air greets me with its coolness, carrying the scent of dew-dampened earth and the faint sweetness of late-season flowers. Above, The sky has become a canvas of soft colors, pale gold beginning to edge the eastern horizon, and the first birds have started their morning songs, tentative at first, then growing bolder. My cottage sits at the edge of our village, close enough to see the other dwellings, but far enough that I can feel a measure of solitude. I walk the familiar path toward my fields, my boots leaving dark prints in the dew-wet grass. The path winds through a small copse of trees, their leaves rustling gently in the barely perceptible breeze, and emerges onto higher ground where I can see the full sweep of the valley below. The village lies nestled in this valley, perhaps 20 cottages in all, with the church tower rising above them, solid and reassuring. Smoke has begun to rise from several chimneys as others wake and kindle their fires, thin grey columns ascending into the lightening sky. The fields spread out before me in strips, each family tending their allocated portions according to the old agreements. My strips lie on the southern slope, where the sun reaches early and stays long, good land that has fed me well these many years. As I walk toward them, I observe the mist that has settled in the low places overnight, lying in the hollows and along the stream that runs through the valley bottom. This mist catches the growing light, becoming luminous and ethereal, and I pause to watch it, knowing that within the hour the sun will burn it away entirely. The moment of sunrise arrives as I reach my fields. The sun lifts itself above the distant hills, a perfect circle of gold that transforms everything it touches. The wet grass sparkles suddenly with countless points of light, each dewdrop becoming a tiny jewel. The mist begins to glow from within, and the whole valley seems to hold its breath in reverence for this daily miracle. I stand with my staff planted in the earth, watching, feeling the first warmth on my face, and offer a silent prayer of gratitude for another day, another chance to work this good land. My plough waits where I left it yesterday evening, its wooden beam weathered grey, its iron share dark with use and earth. I run my hand along the beam, checking for any cracks or weaknesses, finding none. The ox I share with my neighbour Thomas should arrive soon, as we have an arrangement that serves us both well. On days when I need the ox, Thomas tends other tasks, and on his days I do the same. This cooperation, born of necessity and maintained by trust, is the foundation of our survival here. I hear Thomas approaching before I see him, the steady plodding of the ox's hooves, the creak of the yoke, Thomas's low voice speaking gentle encouragements to the animal. He appears over the rise, a solid figure leading the patient beast, and raises his hand in greeting. I return the gesture, and together we work to hitch the ox to my plough, adjusting the yoke and checking the traces. Thomas mentions, almost as an afterthought, that there will be a small harvest feast this evening on the village green, a gathering to celebrate the season's bounty. The news settles warmly in my chest, adding a pleasant anticipation to the day ahead. We exchange a few more words about the weather and the state of the crops, then Thomas departs, leaving me with the ox and the work that awaits. I take up the plough handles, worn smooth by countless hands over countless seasons, and speak softly to the ox, who flicks his ears in acknowledgement. We begin our work, moving slowly down the length of my strip, the plough cutting through the earth with a sound that is both resistance and yielding. The furrow opens behind us, dark and rich, releasing the smell of soil that is one of the most fundamental scents I know. My hands grip the handles firmly, but without tension, my body finding the rhythm that allows the work to continue without excessive strain. This is labor I have done since boyhood, first following my father, then working beside him, and finally, after his death 5 winters past, working alone. The sun climbs higher as we progress, warming the air and drying the dew from the grass. The ox plods steadily, his great shoulders moving beneath his hide, his breath coming in regular snorts. I guide him with small adjustments, keeping the furrow straight, watching for stones that might damage the share. Occasionally I pause to rest, letting the ox stand while I straighten my back and look out over the valley. More smoke rises from the village now, and I can see small figures moving about their morning tasks. The church bell rings, marking the hour, its sound carrying clearly across the distance. The earth beneath my plough is good earth, neither too heavy with clay nor too light with sand, but a balanced mixture that holds moisture without becoming waterlogged and drains without becoming parched. I have added what manure I could spare from my animals, spreading it in autumn and letting the winter rains work it into the soil. Now, turning this earth, I can see the results of that care, the dark richness that promises good growth for next season's planting. This relationship between labor and result, between care given and abundance received, forms the bedrock of my existence. As the morning progresses, I complete several furrows, each one parallel to the last, creating a pattern that pleases my eye with its order and regularity. The repetitive nature of the work allows my mind to wander, though not far, drifting through memories and observations, plans and reflections. I think of my father teaching me to hold the plough, his large hands covering mine on the handles, his patient voice explaining how to read the resistance of the soil, how to know when to push and when to yield. I think of the seasons that have passed since then, each one bringing its particular challenges and rewards, each one deepening my understanding of this land and my place upon it. The ox and I reach the end of another furrow, and I decide this is enough ploughing for the morning. The animal has worked steadily and deserves rest, as do I unhitch him from the plough and lead him to the shade of a large oak that grows at the boundary of my land, where I have left a bucket of water drawn fresh from the well this morning. He drinks deeply, and I pour more water over my own head and neck, feeling it run down my back beneath my tunic, cooling and refreshing. With the ox tethered where he can graze, I turn my attention to other tasks. My crops from earlier plantings need tending, and I walk among the rows, pulling weeds that have appeared since my last inspection, checking the health of each plant. The barley stands tall and golden, nearly ready for harvest, its heads heavy with grain that whispers and rustles in the breeze. The oats are similarly advanced, and I run my hand over their tops, feeling their texture, judging their readiness. In my vegetable plot, cabbages form tight heads, onions push up through the soil, and beans hang heavy on their vines. I harvest some of these beans, filling a small basket I have brought for this purpose, selecting the ones that have reached perfect ripeness. These I will cook tonight after returning from the feast, or perhaps tomorrow, adding them to a pottage with some of the dried peas I have stored. The act of harvesting, of gathering food that I have planted and tended, never loses its fundamental satisfaction. Each bean represents not just sustenance, but proof of the cycle's completion, of promises kept between seed and soil, sun and rain, labor and reward. The morning has fully established itself now, the sun well above the horizon, the air warming steadily. I can hear other villagers at work in their fields, the distant sound of voices, the occasional bark of a dog, the bleating of sheep being moved to fresh pasture. These sounds form a familiar tapestry, the audio landscape of our shared life, and I find comfort in knowing that all around me, others are engaged in similar tasks, each person contributing to the collective survival and prosperity of our community. I return to the oak where the ox rests and sit with my back against its broad trunk, allowing myself a longer rest. From this vantage point, I can see much of my land and beyond it to the village and the surrounding fields. The view never fails to stir something in me, a mixture of pride and humility, satisfaction and responsibility. This land feeds me, clothes me, shelters me, and in return I give it my labor, my care, my attention. The exchange seems fair, even generous, and I am grateful for it. The sun has reached its zenith, hanging directly overhead in a sky that has transformed from the soft pastels of morning into a deep, brilliant blue, unmarred by clouds. The warmth has become substantial now, pressing down upon the land with an almost physical weight, and I feel it soaking into my shoulders and back as I make my way toward the old oak tree that marks the eastern boundary of my fields. This tree has stood here longer than anyone in the village can remember, its trunk thick and gnarled, its branches spreading wide to create an island of shade that offers refuge during the hottest part of the day. I carry with me a cloth bundle containing my midday meal, prepared this morning before I left the cottage. The bundle feels light in my hand, but I know it contains everything I need. A portion of bread, a wedge of cheese, and an apple from the tree that grows behind my cottage. These simple provisions represent the fruits of different labors across different seasons, each item a small miracle of transformation from seed or milk or grain into sustenance. As I settle myself against the oak's trunk, finding the spot where the bark has been worn smooth by my repeated presence, I unwrap the cloth with deliberate slowness, delaying gratification in a way that somehow increases it. The bread comes first, and I break off a piece, examining it in the dappled light that filters through the oak's leaves. The crust is dark and firm, the interior pale and dense, with small irregular holes that speak of proper rising and baking. I place it in my mouth and chew slowly, letting my teeth work through the texture, releasing the fundamental flavor of grain that has been ground and mixed with water and salt, then transformed by fire into this most basic and essential of foods. Each chew brings subtle variations in taste, hints of the wheat itself, the faint tang of fermentation, the mineral note of the salt. I have eaten bread every day of my life, yet in this moment of attention it seems almost new. The cheese follows, a hard yellow cheese that the dairymaid Sarah makes from the milk of her cows. I cut a thin slice with my small knife, the blade passing through the cheese with slight resistance. This cheese has aged through the summer in Sarah's cool cellar, developing a sharpness that complements the bread's mildness. Together, bread and cheese create a harmony in my mouth, each enhancing the other, and I eat several more pieces of each, alternating between them, taking my time, feeling no rush whatsoever. The act of eating becomes almost meditative, a focusing of attention on the present moment, on the simple pleasure of satisfying hunger with good food honestly obtained. The apple I save for last, rolling it in my palm, feeling its smooth skin, noting the variations in its color from deep red to lighter pink to hints of yellow where the sun has not reached as strongly. This apple comes from a tree my father planted when I was a small child, and I remember watching him dig the hole, set the young sapling, and carefully pack earth around its roots. For years the tree gave nothing, just grew slowly, and my father would check on it regularly, pruning here, protecting there, waiting with the patience that all good farmers must cultivate. Then one autumn, when I was perhaps 10 years old, it bore its first small crop, and my father's face had shown such satisfaction that I understood something important about the relationship between patience and reward. Now the tree produces abundantly each year, more apples than I can eat or store, and I share them with neighbors who appreciate their crisp sweetness. This particular apple crunches loudly as I bite into it, the sound sharp in the quiet afternoon, and juice runs down my chin. The flesh is white and firm, the taste both sweet and tart, refreshing in the day's heat. I eat it down to the core, then throw the core into the grass where it will decay and return to the earth, seeds and all, perhaps giving rise to another tree in some future year, continuing the cycle. With my hunger satisfied, I lean back against the oak and allow myself to simply observe the world around me. From this elevated position at the field's edge, I can see far across the valley. The village lies below, its cottages arranged in no particular pattern, but rather scattered according to some organic logic of terrain and family relationships and historical accident. The church stands at the village centre, its stone tower rising above the thatched roofs, its presence both physical and symbolic. I can see the church's graveyard, the wooden crosses and occasional stone markers, where my father rests alongside my mother who died bringing me into this world, a loss I never knew directly but have felt throughout my life as an absence. Beyond the village, the land rises again toward distant hills that mark the edge of our known world. Those hills appear blue in the afternoon light, softened by distance and the slight haze that heat brings. I have never traveled to those hills, never felt the need, as everything I require lies within this valley. Some men are driven to see what lies beyond the horizon, but I am not among them. My world is here in these fields, this village, among these people, and it is enough, more than enough. Smoke rises from several chimneys in the village, more than usual for midday, and I realize that preparations for tonight's feast must be underway. The smell of baking bread reaches me even at this distance, carried on the gentle breeze that has begun to stir the afternoon air. It is a yeasty, wholesome smell that speaks of abundance and celebration. I imagine the village baker, old William, working at his large oven, sliding in loaf after loaf, his face red from the heat, his movements practiced and efficient despite his years. William has been baking bread for the village since before I was born, and his loaves are legendary for their quality, each one perfectly risen, perfectly browned. I can also make out movement in the village, small figures going about their business with what seems like increased purpose. A woman emerges from one cottage carrying a large basket, walks to another cottage, disappears inside. Two children run across the green, their voices faint but audible, carrying that particular quality of excitement that children bring to any break in routine. A man leads a cart pulled by a donkey, the cart presumably loaded with something for the feast, though from this distance I cannot tell what. All of this activity creates a pleasant sense of anticipation, a communal energy that I can feel even from my solitary vantage point. The seasons are changing, I think, as I watch the valley and feel the sun's warmth. We are at that pivot point between summer's abundance and autumn's preparation, when the work of growing gives way to the work of harvesting and storing. Soon the fields will be stripped of their crops, the grain threshed and stored, the vegetables preserved or stored in root cellars, the animals culled or prepared for winter. The cycle that began with spring planting is approaching its completion, and tonight's feast marks this transition, this moment of gratitude before the harder work begins. I have seen this cycle repeat itself 32 times now, once for each year of my life, and each repetition has deepened my understanding of its rhythms and requirements. As a child, I experienced the seasons as simply the way things were, accepting without question the progression from planting to growing to harvest to winter rest. As a young man working beside my father, I began to understand the labor involved, the countless small decisions and actions required to guide crops from seed to harvest. Now, working alone, I feel the full weight of responsibility, knowing that my survival depends entirely on my ability to read the land, the weather, the plants themselves, and respond appropriately. Yet this responsibility does not burden me. Rather, it grounds me, gives my days purpose and structure, connects me to something larger than myself. I am part of a chain that stretches back through my father to his father and beyond, generations of men and women who have worked this land, learned its moods, adapted to its demands. I am also part of a community that depends on each member fulfilling their role, contributing their labor and skill to the collective survival. These connections, temporal and social, give meaning to even the most mundane tasks. A hawk circles high above the valley, riding the thermal currents that rise from the sun-warmed earth. I watch its lazy spirals, admiring the efficiency of its flight, the way it can hang motionless in the air, then suddenly fold its wings and dive toward some prey I cannot see. The hawk lives by different rules than I do, taking what it needs directly from the land without planting or tending or harvesting. Yet we are not so different, the hawk and I, both seeking sustenance, both adapted to our particular niches, both subject to the same fundamental laws of survival. The afternoon stretches before me, and I know I should return to work, but I allow myself a few more minutes of rest. My body feels pleasantly tired, the kind of tiredness that comes from good physical labor rather than strain or stress. My muscles have that slight ache that speaks of use without abuse, and I know that tonight, after the feast, I will sleep deeply and well. This physical tiredness is something I have come to appreciate, even seek, as it brings a satisfaction that mental work alone cannot provide. There is something deeply right about feeling one's body tired from labor that produces tangible results. Eventually, I rise from my spot beneath the oak, folding the cloth that held my meal and tucking it into my belt. The afternoon work will be lighter than the morning's ploughing, tasks that require attention, but not the sustained physical effort of breaking ground. I need to mend a section of fence that has begun to sag, check on my small vegetable garden more thoroughly, and perhaps sharpen some tools in preparation for the harvest work that will soon begin in earnest. These tasks feel manageable, even pleasant, in the afternoon warmth. I walk first to the fence line that separates my land from the common pasture where the village sheep graze. Several of the wooden rails have worked loose from their posts, and one post itself has begun to lean, weakened by rot at its base. I examine the damage, running my hands over the wood, testing its strength, determining what can be repaired and what must be replaced. The post will need replacing, but that can wait for another day. For now, I can shore it up temporarily and reset the rails, work that will take perhaps an hour. I return to my small shed near the cottage to gather the tools I need. A hammer, wooden pegs, a length of rope. The shed is dim and cool inside, smelling of wood and earth and the various materials stored there. Everything has its place here as well. Tools hanging from pegs or standing in corners, materials stacked neatly, a sense of order that makes finding what I need simple and quick. I gather what I require and return to the fence. The work is straightforward but requires care. I use the rope to pull the leaning post more upright, then brace it with stones packed firmly around its base. This will hold until I can dig a new hole and set a fresh post. The rails I reattach with wooden pegs, hammering them through the pre-existing holes, making sure each connection is firm. As I work, I think about the purpose of this fence, how it defines boundaries and keeps animals where they should be, how it represents an agreement between myself and my neighbors about the proper use of land. Without such agreements, without these physical markers of shared understanding, our community could not function. The sun has moved perceptibly westward by the time I finish with the fence, and the quality of light has begun to change, becoming slightly softer, the shadows growing longer. I test my repairs, pushing against the rails, satisfied that they will hold. The work is not beautiful, but it is functional, and function is what matters. I gather my tools and return them to the shed, then walk to my vegetable garden. The garden occupies a small plot near my cottage, protected from the worst winds by the cottage itself and by a woven fence of willow branches. Here I grow the vegetables that supplement my diet of bread and grain. Cabbages, onions, beans, peas, turnips, and a few herbs for flavoring. The garden requires constant attention, as weeds grow enthusiastically in the rich soil, and various insects and animals view it as their personal larder. I spend time now pulling weeds, checking each plant for signs of disease or pest damage, harvesting what is ready. The cabbages are particularly fine this year, their heads tight and heavy, their outer leaves a deep blue-green. I cut one for tonight, after the feast, thinking I will make a simple soup with it, adding some of the beans and perhaps a bit of the salt pork I have hanging in the cottage. The onions I leave for now, though they are nearly ready, their tops beginning to yellow and fall over. Another week, perhaps, and I will pull them all, braid their tops together, and hang them to dry. As I work in the garden, I become aware of increased activity in the village below. The afternoon is advancing, and people are clearly preparing for the evening gathering. I can see the village green being swept, tables being carried out from various cottages, children running errands for their parents. The sense of anticipation has grown stronger, more palpable, and I feel it myself, a pleasant eagerness for the evening's simple celebration. I finish my garden work and stand brushing dirt from my hands and knees. The afternoon has been good, productive without being exhausting, and I feel satisfied with what I have accomplished. The sun is perhaps 2 hours from setting, time enough to complete one more task before I need to prepare myself for the feast. I decide to sharpen my scythe, as the grain harvest will begin soon, and a sharp blade makes that work infinitely easier. I retrieve the scythe from the shed, along with my whetstone and a small container of water. Finding a comfortable spot in the shade, I begin the rhythmic work of sharpening, drawing the stone along the blade's edge at the proper angle, listening for the distinctive sound that indicates the stone is cutting properly. This is work that requires attention but allows the mind to wander, and I find myself thinking about the evening ahead, imagining the gathering, the food, the warm company of neighbors. The blade gradually takes on a keener edge, and I test it carefully with my thumb, feeling its sharpness without cutting myself. Satisfied, I wipe the blade clean and return the scythe to the shed. The afternoon is drawing toward evening now, the light definitely softer, the air beginning to cool slightly. I walk to the well and draw fresh water, pouring it over my head and arms, washing away the day's sweat and dirt. The cold water shocks my skin pleasantly, leaving me feeling refreshed and alert. Back in the cottage, I change from my work tunic into my better one, kept for occasions like this. It is not fancy, just cleaner and less worn, but it feels appropriate for a gathering. I run my fingers through my hair, attempting to bring some order to it, and check that my hands are reasonably clean. These small preparations feel important, a way of honoring the occasion and showing respect for my neighbors. The sun is lowering toward the hills now, and I know it is time to make my way to the village green. I feel a quiet contentment as I close my cottage door and begin walking down the familiar path, anticipation mixing with the pleasant tiredness in my limbs, the day's work done, the evening's simple pleasures ahead. The afternoon settles over the land with a drowsy warmth that seems to slow everything to a gentler pace. The sun hangs in the western half of the sky, no longer at its fierce zenith, but still strong enough to make the air shimmer slightly over the fields. I stand outside my cottage, having changed back into my work tunic after my brief preparation for the evening, realizing there are still several hours before the feast and many small tasks that need attention. The day feels suspended in that particular way summer afternoons do, as if time itself has grown thick and languid, moving forward but without urgency. My chickens need feeding, and I walk to the small coop I built against the cottage's north wall, where the birds spend their nights safe from foxes and other predators. During the day, they roam freely within the fenced area I have created for them, scratching at the earth, pecking at insects, their constant soft clucking forming a peaceful background sound. I scatter grain from my bucket, watching as they converge on the food with their peculiar jerky movements, their heads bobbing, their feathers catching the light. There are 6 hens and 1 rooster, enough to provide me with eggs most days and occasionally a bird for the pot when one grows too old to lay. The rooster is a magnificent creature, his feathers iridescent green and copper, his comb bright red, his crow loud and proud. He watches over his hens with vigilant attention, always alert for danger, always ready to sound the alarm. I have developed a grudging respect for this bird, even though he sometimes challenges me when I enter his domain, puffing himself up and making aggressive noises. Today he merely watches me with one bright eye, apparently deciding I pose no threat to his flock. After ensuring the chickens have enough water in their trough, I walk to the small paddock where I keep my cow and her calf. The cow is a gentle brown creature with patient eyes, and she has served me well these past 4 years, providing milk that I drink fresh or trade to Sarah the dairymaid for cheese. The calf, born this past spring, is growing rapidly, all long legs and curious nature. He approaches the fence as I arrive, hoping for some treat, and I scratch between his ears, feeling his soft fur, his warmth. The cow needs no feeding at this time of day, as she has been grazing in the paddock since morning, but I check her water and ensure the fence has no gaps where the calf might escape. Young cattle are notorious for finding weaknesses in fences, and I have no desire to spend an evening chasing a wayward calf across the countryside. Everything appears secure, and I spend a few moments simply watching them, finding something calming in their placid presence, their uncomplicated existence. My sheep are pastured on the common land with the rest of the village flock, watched over by young Peter, whose family has tended the village sheep for generations. But I walk out to check on them anyway, wanting to ensure my 4 ewes are healthy and accounted for. The common pasture lies beyond my fields, a broad expanse of grass that belongs to no one and everyone, used according to ancient agreements about how many animals each household may graze there. I find the flock scattered across the hillside, perhaps 40 sheep in total, their wool cream-colored in the afternoon sun. Peter sits beneath a tree, whittling a piece of wood, his dog lying beside him. The dog's ears perk up as I approach, but Peter speaks a quiet word and the animal relaxes. We exchange greetings, and Peter tells me my ewes are all well, pointing to where they graze together as they usually do. I can see them clearly, recognize them by small differences in their size and bearing, and I am satisfied. Peter mentions the feast, his young face showing excitement. He will attend, he says, though he must first ensure the sheep are safely pennied for the night. We talk briefly about the weather, about the health of the flock, about nothing in particular, our conversation easy and unforced. Peter is perhaps 15, on the cusp of manhood, and I remember being that age, remember the mixture of eagerness and uncertainty that characterized those years. He seems a good lad, responsible and attentive to his duties, and I tell him so before taking my leave. Walking back toward my cottage, I notice how the insects have increased their activity in the afternoon warmth. Bees work the late-season flowers with industrious determination, their buzzing creating a constant hum that rises and falls. Butterflies drift past on erratic paths, their wings catching the light. A dragonfly hovers near the stream that runs through the lower part of my land, its wings a blur, its body iridescent blue. These creatures go about their business with no awareness of human concerns, following instincts and patterns laid down long before our village existed, and I find something reassuring in their indifference to our affairs. The barn requires attention, as it always does. This structure is larger than my cottage, built to house animals in winter and store hay and grain year-round. Its walls are thick timber, its roof steeply pitched and thatched, its door wide enough to admit a loaded cart. Inside, the air is cool and dim, smelling of hay and animals and old wood. Dust motes drift in the shafts of light that enter through gaps in the walls, creating patterns that shift and change as I move. I have been meaning to organize the tools stored here, as they have become jumbled over the summer's work. Now seems a good time for this task, and I begin sorting through them, hanging each implement in its proper place. The scythes go together, their blades carefully positioned so no one will accidentally brush against them. The rakes and hoes occupy another section, their handles smooth from use. My spare plough parts, the wooden pegs and iron fittings that might be needed for repairs, I place in a wooden box where they will stay dry and accessible. As I work, I find tools that need repair or maintenance. A rake with several broken teeth, which I set aside to mend later. A hoe with a loose handle that needs re-wedging. A leather harness with a cracked strap that should be replaced before it fails completely. These discoveries do not frustrate me. Rather, they represent opportunities to practice the skills my father taught me, to maintain my equipment properly so it will serve me well. A farmer who neglects his tools, my father often said, is a farmer who will find himself unable to work when work is most needed. The afternoon light slanting through the barn door has shifted noticeably by the time I finish organizing, and I step back outside into the warmth. From here I can see down into the village, and the preparations for the feast have clearly intensified. The village green, that central open space where we gather for celebrations and meetings, is being transformed. Long tables have appeared, carried out from various cottages, arranged in rows. Women move between them, spreading cloths, setting out wooden plates and cups. Children dart about, some helping, some simply excited by the break in routine. I can see old William the baker making multiple trips from his cottage to the green, each time carrying baskets covered with cloth, the bread for tonight's feast. Even from this distance, I can imagine the weight of those baskets, the warmth of the fresh loaves, their golden crusts and soft interiors. My mouth waters slightly at the thought, even though I am not particularly hungry after my midday meal. Other villagers are contributing their own offerings. I see Margaret the alewife rolling a barrel toward the green, her strong arms managing the weight with practiced ease. Thomas appears with a whole roasted fowl on a platter, the bird's skin glistening with fat. Sarah brings a large wheel of cheese, and someone else carries a basket of apples. The abundance surprises me slightly, though I know it should not. We have had a good year, the weather favorable, the crops healthy, and this feast is our way of acknowledging that blessing, of sharing the bounty before the harder work of full harvest begins. Several children are gathering wildflowers from the meadow that borders the village, and I watch as they run back and forth, their arms full of color, yellow buttercups, purple knapweed, white daisies, the last of the summer blooms. These flowers will decorate the tables, adding beauty to the practical arrangements of food and drink. The sight of the children at this task, their movements quick and joyful, stirs something in me, a mixture of emotions I cannot quite name. Perhaps it is simply the recognition of innocence, of that brief period in life when celebration is pure and uncomplicated by the weight of responsibility. I decide to check my tools one more time, particularly those I will need soon for harvest. My sickles hang in the barn, and I take them down, examining each blade carefully. One needs sharpening, and I fetch my whetstone to attend to this now rather than later. The rhythmic sound of stone on metal fills the barn, a sound as old as agriculture itself, and my hands move with the certainty of long practice. The blade gradually takes on that keen edge that will make cutting grain efficient rather than exhausting. While I work, my mind drifts to thoughts of the harvest ahead. The grain is nearly ready, another week perhaps, depending on the weather. The work will be intense when it begins. Long days of cutting and binding and stacking, every able body in the village contributing because the window for harvest is narrow and the consequences of delay potentially severe. Rain at the wrong time can ruin a crop, and we all know stories of years when wet weather destroyed the harvest, leading to hunger and hardship through the following winter. But I will not dwell on such possibilities now. The sky is clear, the weather settled, and there is no reason to expect problems. Better to focus on preparation, on ensuring my tools are sharp and my strength is preserved. The harvest will come soon enough, and when it does, I will be ready. I finish sharpening the sickle and test its edge carefully, satisfied with the result. Returning it to its place, I notice a bird has built a nest in the barn's rafters, and I can hear the cheeping of young birds, their voices insistent and hungry. The parent bird, a small brown sparrow, flies in through a gap near the roof, something in its beak, and disappears into the nest. Moments later it emerges and flies out again, beginning another foraging trip. This constant labor, this tireless feeding of young, continues from dawn to dusk throughout the nesting season, and I marvel at the bird's dedication. The afternoon continues its slow progression toward evening, and I find myself drawn back outside, wanting to observe the village preparations more closely. I walk down the path that leads from my cottage to the village proper, moving without hurry, enjoying the warmth on my back and the familiar feel of the earth beneath my feet. The path is well worn, countless feet having traveled it over countless years, and it winds through a small grove of trees before emerging near the village edge. As I walk, I pass other cottages, each similar to mine in basic construction, but different in small details that reflect the personalities of their occupants. Some have flower gardens, bright splashes of color against the earth-toned walls. Others have vegetable plots that extend right to their doors. One cottage has a grapevine growing up its south wall, the fruit just beginning to ripen. Each household manages its small plot according to its own needs and preferences, creating a patchwork of individual choices within our shared community. I encounter several neighbors along the way, and we exchange greetings and brief words. Everyone seems in good spirits, anticipating the evening ahead. Old Geoffrey, who must be 70 if he is a day, sits on a bench outside his cottage, his gnarled hands resting on his walking stick. He calls out to me, his voice still strong despite his years, and we talk for a few moments about the weather and the crops. Geoffrey has seen more harvests than anyone else in the village, and his memory reaches back to times I know only through stories. He tells me this year reminds him of another. 40 years past, when the weather was similarly favorable and the harvest abundant. Near the village green, I find several men setting up benches and arranging the tables in their final positions. I offer to help, and they accept gratefully. Together, we maneuver the heavy wooden benches, placing them where they will provide seating for the feast. The work is simple but requires coordination, and we move with the easy cooperation of people who have worked together many times before. No one gives orders. We simply see what needs doing and do it, each person contributing according to their strength and ability. The green itself has been swept clean, the grass cut short, any debris removed. Someone has even scattered fresh rushes in places where the ground is bare, creating a pleasant surface. The tables now stand in neat rows, their surfaces covered with cloths that, while not fancy, are clean and serviceable. The wooden plates and cups wait to be filled, and the sight of this preparation, this communal effort to create something pleasant, fills me with a quiet satisfaction. Women are beginning to bring out the food now, and the tables gradually fill with the evening's offerings. There are loaves of bread, their crusts golden and inviting, roasted fowl and joints of meat, their surfaces glistening, wheels of cheese, both hard and soft varieties, bowls of cooked vegetables, roots and greens prepared in various ways. Honey cakes, a rare treat, their sweetness a luxury we enjoy only on special occasions. And barrels of ale, tapped and ready, the drink that will flow freely tonight as we celebrate together. I step back from the tables, admiring the abundance displayed there. This food represents the labor of many hands, the contribution of many households, each family bringing what they can spare, what they have produced through their own efforts. The sight reminds me that while I often work alone in my fields, I am never truly alone. I am part of this community, connected to these people through bonds of mutual dependence and shared experience. The sun is lowering toward the western hills now, and the light has taken on that golden quality that comes in the hour before sunset. The air is cooling slightly, losing the day's accumulated heat, and a gentle breeze has begun to stir, carrying the mingled scents of food and flowers and fresh-cut grass. The children who were gathering flowers earlier have finished their task, and the tables are now decorated with small bunches of blooms, adding color and beauty to the practical arrangements. I realize I should return to my cottage to wash and change into my better tunic, as I had planned earlier. The feast will begin soon, perhaps in an hour, and I want to arrive clean and properly dressed. I take my leave of the men still working on the green, thanking them for their efforts, and walk back up the path toward home. The cottage feels cool after the afternoon warmth, and I move through it with familiar efficiency. I pour water from my bucket into a basin and wash my face, hands, and arms, scrubbing away the day's accumulation of dirt and sweat. The water is cold, drawn from the well this morning, and it shocks my skin pleasantly, leaving me feeling refreshed and alert. I dry myself with a rough cloth, then change into my better tunic, the one I reserve for occasions like this. This tunic is made of the same coarse wool as my work clothes, but it is newer, less worn, and I have taken care to keep it relatively clean. I pull it over my head, adjusting it so it hangs properly, then tie my belt around my waist. Looking down at myself, I am satisfied. I am no fine lord in expensive cloth, but I am clean and presentable, and that is what matters. I run my fingers through my hair again, attempting to bring some order to it, and check my reflection in the small piece of polished metal that serves as my mirror. The face that looks back at me is weathered and tanned, lines beginning to form around the eyes and mouth, the face of a man who spends his days outdoors in all weathers. It is not a handsome face, but it is honest, and I am content with it. With nothing left to do but wait, I step outside and sit on the bench beside my door, the same bench where I often sit in the evenings, watching the sun set and the stars emerge. From here I can see the village below, can see the gathering preparations reaching their completion. More people are arriving at the green now, families emerging from their cottages, walking down the various paths that converge on that central space. The light continues to change, becoming richer and more golden with each passing moment. The shadows lengthen across the valley, and the distant hills take on a purple hue. Birds are beginning their evening songs, different from the morning chorus but equally beautiful, a celebration of day's end rather than day's beginning. A bat flickers past, beginning its nightly hunt for insects, its flight erratic but purposeful. I think about the day that has passed, reviewing it in my mind as I often do. The morning's ploughing, the midday rest, the afternoon's various tasks, feeding animals, checking fences, organizing tools, sharpening blades. Each task completed satisfactorily, nothing urgent left undone. The rhythm of the day has been good, productive without being exhausting, and I feel that pleasant tiredness that comes from honest labor. And now the evening approaches, bringing with it the simple pleasure of community, of sharing food and conversation with neighbors, of marking the season's passage with this small celebration. I am not a man given to great displays of emotion, but I feel a genuine happiness as I sit here, a contentment with my life and my place in this world. The work is hard, the rewards modest, but there is a rightness to it all that satisfies something deep within me. The sun touches the hilltops now, and I know it is time to make my way down to the village. I stand, brushing off my tunic, and begin walking down the familiar path one more time. Other villagers are converging on the green from various directions, and I fall in with a small group, exchanging greetings, sharing in the general anticipation. The evening air is soft and pleasant, carrying the scent of the feast, and our footsteps are light as we walk together toward the gathering, toward the simple celebration that awaits us all. The village green has transformed into something almost magical in the golden light of the descending sun. As I approach with my neighbors, I can see that nearly everyone has arrived, the community gathered in this central space that has witnessed countless such gatherings over generations beyond memory. The long tables stand laden with food, their surfaces catching the warm light, and people mill about in small groups, their voices creating a gentle murmur that rises into the evening air like a prayer of thanksgiving. I pause at the edge of the green, taking in the scene before me. The tables form two parallel rows with a wide space between them where people can walk and gather. At one end, the barrels of ale rest on sturdy stands, and I can see Thomas already filling cups for those who approach. The food is arranged with no particular ceremony, but with an abundance that speaks of genuine plenty. Loaves of bread stacked in golden pyramids, platters of roasted meat still steaming slightly, wheels of cheese cut into generous portions, bowls of vegetables glistening with butter, and those precious honey cakes arranged on wooden boards like small treasures. The wildflowers the children gathered earlier adorn the tables in small bunches, their colors vivid against the pale cloth. Purple and yellow and white, they nod gently in the breeze that has begun to stir as the day cools. Someone has also hung garlands of late-season greenery from the posts that mark the green's boundaries, adding to the festive atmosphere without overdoing it. Everything feels balanced, appropriate, neither too austere nor too elaborate, perfectly suited to who we are and what we are celebrating. I make my way toward the tables, nodding to neighbors as I pass. Old Geoffrey has claimed a seat on one of the benches, his walking stick propped beside him, and he raises a hand in greeting as I approach. I stop to exchange a few words with him, asking after his health, listening as he comments on the fine evening and the good turnout. His eyes, though dimmed by age, still hold a sharpness, and he watches the gathering with evident satisfaction, as if each such occasion is a victory against the passage of time. Sarah the dairymaid stands near one of the tables, arranging her cheeses, and she smiles as I approach. We talk briefly about the quality of her latest batch, and she insists I try a piece of a new variety she has been experimenting with, one aged with herbs. I accept a small portion, tasting it carefully, and find it excellent, the sharpness of the cheese balanced by the subtle flavors of thyme and rosemary. I tell her so, and her face shows pleasure at the compliment. Such small exchanges, these moments of appreciation and acknowledgement, form the fabric of our community life. William, the baker, moves among the crowd with surprising energy for a man of his years, ensuring everyone knows which loaves are which, pointing out the special ones he made with honey and spices for this occasion. His face is still flushed from the day's baking, and flour dusts his tunic despite his obvious attempts to brush it clean. He catches my eye and grins, gesturing toward the honey cakes with obvious pride. I make my way to them and take one, biting into it carefully. The sweetness floods my mouth, the honey mixing with the grain and the subtle spice of cinnamon, a flavor so rich and complex it almost overwhelms. I close my eyes briefly, savoring it, and when I open them, William is watching with satisfaction. More villagers continue to arrive, and the green fills with people. I see families I have known my entire life, children who were born since I reached manhood, elders who remember my father and grandfather. We are perhaps 50 souls in total, not a large community by any measure, but sufficient unto ourselves, bound together by proximity and necessity, and something deeper, a shared understanding of what it means to live in this place, to work this land, to depend upon one another. The children, freed from their usual chores and restrictions, run about in small groups, their laughter bright and clear. They play games whose rules I only partly understand, chasing each other around the tables, hiding behind adults, their energy seemingly boundless. Yet even in their play, they show an awareness of boundaries, never venturing too close to the food tables, never becoming so boisterous as to disturb the adults' conversations. They have been raised well, taught respect without having their spirits crushed. I fill a wooden cup with ale from one of the barrels, the liquid dark and rich, and take a long drink. The ale is good, slightly sweet with a pleasant bitterness underneath, and it goes down smoothly, warming my throat and belly. Margaret, the alewife, stands nearby, and I compliment her on the brew. She accepts the praise with a nod, explaining that she added more honey to this batch, wanting something special for the feast. The extra sweetness is noticeable, and I tell her it was a good decision. With my cup in hand, I begin to move among the gathering, stopping to talk with various neighbors. Each conversation is brief, comfortable, touching on familiar topics. The weather, the crops, the health of animals, small observations about daily life. There is no urgency to these exchanges, no pressing business to conduct. We are simply being together, sharing space and time, acknowledging our connections to one another. I find myself in conversation with Thomas, who worked with me this morning bringing the ox for ploughing. He asks how the work went after he left, and I tell him about the furrows I completed, the fence I mended, the various afternoon tasks. He nods along, understanding without need for detailed explanation, and shares his own day's activities. His wife joins us, a quiet woman named Anne who rarely speaks but whose presence is always calming. She has brought a basket of apples from their tree, and she offers me one, which I accept gratefully. The sun continues its descent, and the quality of light shifts moment by moment. The golden glow deepens, becoming almost amber, and everything it touches seems to gain a warmth beyond the merely visual. The faces of my neighbors glow in this light, their features softened, made beautiful by the gentle illumination. Even the most weathered and worn among us appear transformed, and I think about how this light is a gift, a daily reminder of beauty that costs nothing and belongs to everyone. Someone suggests we should begin eating properly, and this suggestion meets with general agreement. There is no formal signal, no ceremony to mark the beginning of the feast. Instead, people simply begin to move toward the tables, filling their wooden plates with food, taking what they want, what appeals to them. The movement is orderly without being rigid, everyone patient, no one pushing or grabbing. We have done this many times before, and the patterns are well established. I take my place in the loose line that has formed, and when my turn comes, I select portions of various dishes. A thick slice of bread, still slightly warm. A piece of roasted fowl, the skin crispy and dark. Some of the root vegetables, carrots and turnips cooked until tender. A wedge of cheese, and one more of those precious honey cakes. My plate fills quickly, and I step away to make room for others. Finding a seat on one of the benches, I settle myself and begin to eat. The food is simple but excellent, each dish prepared with care and skill. The bread has that perfect texture, crusty outside and soft within, and it soaks up the juices from the meat beautifully. The fowl is tender, seasoned with herbs I can taste but not quite identify. The vegetables have been cooked with butter and salt, their natural sweetness enhanced rather than overwhelmed. Everything tastes better somehow, eaten here in the open air, surrounded by neighbors, part of this communal celebration. Around me, others are similarly engaged with their food, eating with evident enjoyment, but without haste. Conversations continue between bites, laughter punctuates the general murmur of voices, and the atmosphere remains warm and convivial. There is something deeply satisfying about sharing food this way, about knowing that what we eat comes from our own labor, our own land, our own animals. We are not dependent on distant markets or unknown merchants. We have made this abundance ourselves, and now we share it freely. The children have their own table, set slightly apart, and I watch as they eat with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of youth. Their faces show pure enjoyment, no thought for anything beyond the present moment, the present pleasure. Some of them have already finished eating and returned to their games, while others continue to work through their portions, their attention divided between food and play. As the meal progresses, the sun finally touches the horizon, beginning its descent below the hills. The sky transforms into a canvas of colors, orange and pink and purple, layered in bands that shift and blend as I watch. The clouds, few though they are, catch the light and glow as if lit from within. This display, this daily miracle, causes conversations to pause as people turn to watch, to witness this moment of transition from day to night. The light changes everything it touches. The village cottages, visible beyond the green, seem to glow warmly. The church tower rises dark against the brilliant sky, its stones solid and enduring. The fields beyond, my fields among them, lie peaceful and still, their work done for the day. And here on the green, we sit bathed in this extraordinary light, our faces turned upward, our hearts full of simple gratitude. As the sun disappears completely, leaving only its afterglow, the evening deepens into twilight. The first stars begin to appear, faint at first but growing stronger as the sky darkens. Someone has lit torches and placed them around the green, and their flickering light adds to the atmosphere, creating dancing shadows and warm pools of illumination. The temperature continues to drop, and the air takes on that particular coolness that belongs to late summer evenings, pleasant rather than uncomfortable. I have finished eating, my plate empty, my belly full, and I sit contentedly, my cup of ale in hand, watching the gathering around me. People have begun to move about again, no longer focused on eating, but on conversation and companionship. Small groups form and reform, people drifting from one conversation to another, the social patterns fluid and natural. There is no hierarchy here, no rigid structure of who should speak with whom. We are simply neighbors, equals in this moment, sharing in this simple celebration. Old Geoffrey has begun to tell a story, and a small crowd has gathered around him. I move closer to listen, finding a place where I can hear his voice. The story is one I have heard before, about a winter many years ago when the snow fell so deep that the village was cut off for weeks. Geoffrey tells it well, his voice rising and falling, his hands gesturing to emphasize certain points. The listeners are attentive, even those who, like me, know the story already. There is comfort in the familiar, in hearing again these tales that connect us to our past. When Geoffrey finishes, there is a moment of appreciative silence. Then someone else begins a different story. This one about a summer when the drought was so severe that the stream nearly dried up. These stories serve a purpose beyond mere entertainment. They remind us that we have faced difficulties before and survived, that our community has endured through challenges that might have broken a less cohesive group. They are lessons and reassurances wrapped in the form of narrative. The children have grown quieter now, their earlier energy beginning to wane. Some of the younger ones have fallen asleep in their mother's arms or curled up on blankets spread on the grass. Others sit close to their parents, fighting sleep, not wanting to miss anything. Their faces show that particular drowsiness that comes to children at the end of long, exciting days, and I smile at the sight, remembering my own childhood, my own resistance to sleep when something interesting was happening. Margaret begins to sing, her voice clear and true, and others gradually join in. The song is an old one, a harvest song that everyone knows, its melody simple and its words celebrating the bounty of the land. We sing together, our voices blending, creating something larger than any individual contribution. I add my own voice, not particularly strong or skilled, but sincere, and feel the pleasure of being part of this collective sound, this shared expression of gratitude and joy. The song ends, and another begins, this one slower and more contemplative, about the changing seasons and the passage of time. The mood shifts slightly, becoming more reflective, and I feel it in myself as well, a turning inward, a consideration of deeper things. The year is moving toward its end, the cycle approaching completion, and soon we will face the challenges of harvest and preparation for winter. But tonight, in this moment, we pause to acknowledge what we have, to give thanks for the abundance we have been granted. As the singing continues, I find my thoughts drifting to my father, to the many harvest feasts he attended in this same place. I can almost see him, standing where I now stand, his face lit by torchlight, his voice, joining in the songs. He loved these gatherings, I remember, loved the sense of community they fostered, the way they brought people together in shared celebration. His absence is a quiet ache, but it is softened by the knowledge that I am continuing what he began, maintaining the connections he valued, participating in the traditions he helped preserve. The evening progresses gently, without any sense of rush or pressure to move things along. People eat more if they wish, refilling their plates with smaller portions, sampling dishes they missed the first time. The ale continues to flow, though no one drinks to excess. This is not that kind of gathering. We are here to celebrate, not to escape, and the mood remains warm and clear-headed throughout. I find myself in conversation with several neighbors, talking about plans for the coming harvest, about who will help whom, about the logistics of getting the grain cut and threshed and stored before weather might threaten it. These are practical discussions, but they are also expressions of our interdependence, our recognition that we cannot succeed alone. The harvest requires cooperation, requires everyone contributing their labor and their tools and their knowledge. We make our plans quietly, without fuss, each person knowing their role, their responsibilities. The stars have grown bright now, filling the darkening sky with their ancient light. I look up at them, trying to pick out the patterns my father taught me: the plough, the bear, the hunter. These same stars have looked down on countless harvest feasts, countless generations of farmers celebrating their survival and their success. The thought connects me to something vast and timeless, and I feel small but not insignificant, a single link in a chain that stretches back into the distant past and forward into an unknowable future. A few more songs are sung, each one familiar, each one carrying its own associations and memories. Between songs, there are stories and jokes, gentle laughter that ripples through the gathering. The children who are still awake sit close to the adults, their eyes heavy, but their attention caught by the stories, by the warmth of the communal gathering. The torches burn steadily, their light warm and flickering, creating an island of illumination in the deepening darkness. Eventually, gradually, the gathering begins to disperse. There is no formal ending, no announcement that the feast is over. Instead, people simply begin to take their leave, thanking their hosts, gathering their children, saying their good nights. Families drift away in small groups, heading back to their cottages, their voices fading as they move into the darkness. The process is slow and gentle, taking perhaps an hour, as people are reluctant to leave, but also aware that tomorrow will bring its own demands, its own labors. I help with the cleaning, joining others in clearing the tables, gathering the wooden plates and cups, covering the leftover food. There is still plenty remaining, and it will be distributed among the households tomorrow, nothing wasted, everything valued. We work together in comfortable silence, the tasks simple and familiar, requiring no discussion or direction. The torches are extinguished one by one, and the darkness grows deeper, broken only by the stars above and the occasional lamp carried by someone heading home. When the work is done, I bid good night to the few remaining neighbors and begin my own walk home. The path is dark but familiar, and my feet find their way without conscious thought. The night air is cool and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and earth and the lingering smell of wood smoke from the extinguished torches. Around me, the countryside lies quiet and peaceful, the day's labors done, the night's rest beginning. As I walk, I reflect on the evening, on the simple pleasure of sharing food and conversation with neighbors, of being part of this community, this place. The feast was not elaborate or fancy, but it was genuine, a true celebration of our collective labor and our shared abundance. These moments of coming together, of acknowledging our connections to one another, are what make the solitary work of farming bearable, even meaningful. We labor alone in our fields, but we are never truly alone, always part of this larger whole. The cottage appears ahead, a dark shape against the star-filled sky, and I feel a quiet happiness at the sight of it, at the prospect of rest after a long and satisfying day. Tomorrow will bring new work, new challenges, but tonight I am content, filled with good food and good company, grateful for this life, this place, these people. The day has been exactly what it should be, productive, peaceful, and ending in simple celebration. I could ask for nothing more. The path home winds through darkness that has grown complete, the last traces of twilight having faded while I lingered at the feast. Above me, the stars have emerged in their full glory, countless points of light scattered across the vast dome of the sky with a profusion that never fails to move me. The moon has not yet risen, leaving the stars unchallenged in their dominance, and they provide just enough light to distinguish the path from the grass on either side, to see the dark shapes of trees and hedgerows, to navigate this familiar route that my feet could follow even in absolute darkness. The air has cooled considerably, carrying that particular crispness that late summer nights bring, a hint of the autumn that will soon arrive. I can smell the earth, damp with evening dew, and the faint sweetness of night-blooming flowers, whose names I do not know, but whose scent has accompanied my evening walks for as long as I can remember. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, its voice lonely and haunting, and I pause to listen, trying to determine its location by sound alone. The call comes again, from the direction of the old oak grove, and I picture the bird perched on a high branch, its large eyes scanning the ground for movement, for prey. My footsteps make soft sounds on the path, a gentle rhythm that matches my breathing, my heartbeat. There is no hurry in my movements, no urgency to reach home quickly. Instead, I walk slowly, savoring these moments of solitude after the warmth and companionship of the feast. The transition from community to solitude feels natural and necessary, each state complementing the other, neither complete without its opposite. I need both the gathering and the returning, the sharing and the silence. As I walk, I become aware of the night sounds that surround me, sounds that go unnoticed during the day but emerge clearly in the darkness. The chirping of crickets creates a constant background chorus, rising and falling in waves. Small rustlings in the grass beside the path speak of mice or voles going about their nocturnal business. A fox barks somewhere on the hillside, the sound sharp and brief. These creatures live their lives in parallel with mine, occupying the same landscape, but experiencing it differently, active when I rest, resting when I work. The cottage appears ahead, its dark shape familiar and welcoming. I can just make out the outline of its roof against the stars, the solid rectangle of its walls. No light shows from within, as I left no candle burning, but I know every detail of its interior, could navigate it blindfolded if necessary. This small structure has been my home for the years since my father's death, and before that, it was home to both of us, and before that, to him and my mother. The continuity of this dwelling, its persistence through generations, gives me comfort. I reach the door and lift the latch, the familiar click and scrape of metal on wood. The door swings inward, and I step into the deeper darkness of the interior. The air inside is cooler than outside, and it carries the faint smell of the morning's fire, of bread and wool, and the various scents that accumulate in a lived-in space. I stand for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, though there is little to see. The window is a pale rectangle, slightly lighter than the surrounding walls, admitting the faint starlight. Moving carefully, I make my way to the hearth where embers from the morning's fire might still glow. I kneel and blow gently on the ashes, hoping to find some life remaining, but there is nothing. The fire has died completely, which is no matter. I do not need its warmth tonight, and I am too tired to rebuild it. Instead, I feel my way to the shelf where I keep my candles and find one by touch. My flint and steel rest beside them, and I strike sparks into a small pile of tinder, coaxing a flame to life. The candle catches, and warm light floods the cottage, pushing back the darkness, revealing the familiar space. Everything is as I left it this morning, which seems impossibly long ago now. My bed in the corner, its blanket neatly folded. The table with its simple bench. The tools hanging on their pegs. The chest containing my few possessions. The sight of these things, unchanged and unchanging, brings a deep sense of peace. This is my place, my refuge, the physical manifestation of my life's simple order. I move to the water bucket and ladle some into my wooden cup, drinking deeply. The water is cool and clean, drawn from the village well this morning, and it washes away the lingering taste of ale and honey cake. I drink a second cup more slowly, then pour water into my basin to wash my face and hands. The cold water shocks my skin pleasantly, removing the day's accumulation of dust and sweat, leaving me feeling refreshed despite my tiredness. Changing out of my better tunic, I hang it carefully on its peg, smoothing the fabric, ensuring it will be ready for the next occasion that requires it. I pull on my sleeping shirt, a simple garment of soft, worn linen that has been washed so many times it feels like a second skin. The familiarity of these evening rituals performed countless times before creates a meditative quality, each action flowing naturally into the next. Before preparing for bed, I walk to the window and look out at the night. The stars are brilliant, undimmed by any competing light, and I can see the familiar constellations clearly. The plough hangs low in the northern sky, its shape unmistakable. The bear prowls nearby, eternal and unchanging. To the east, I can see the first hint of the moon's glow, though the moon itself has not yet cleared the horizon. Soon it will rise, adding its silver light to the stars' gold, transforming the landscape once again. The dark shapes of trees stand out against the slightly lighter sky, their branches moving gently in a breeze I cannot feel from inside the cottage. My fields lie invisible in the darkness, but I know they are there, the furrows I ploughed this morning, the crops growing toward harvest, the fence I mended, the earth I have tended with such care. All of it rests now, as I will soon rest, gathering strength for tomorrow's labors. I think about the day that has passed, reviewing its gentle rhythms in my mind. The early rising, the morning's ploughing, the midday rest beneath the oak, the afternoon's various tasks, and finally the feast, the gathering of neighbors, the sharing of food and song and story. Each part of the day had its own character, its own particular quality, yet they all flowed together into a coherent whole, a single day that felt complete and satisfying. The physical tiredness in my body is profound but pleasant, the kind of exhaustion that comes from good work well done. My muscles ache slightly, particularly in my shoulders and back from the morning's ploughing, but the ache is not painful, merely a reminder of effort expended. My hands, when I look at them in the candlelight, show the marks of labor, calluses, small cuts, dirt worked into the creases despite my washing. These are a farmer's hands, shaped by their work, and I feel no shame in their roughness. Moving to my bed, I turn down the blanket and sit on the edge of the straw mattress. The straw rustles beneath my weight, a sound as familiar as my own breathing. I remove my boots, setting them carefully beside the bed where I can find them easily in the morning. My feet, freed from their confinement, feel cool and light, and I wiggle my toes, enjoying the sensation. Before lying down, I extinguish the candle, pinching the wick between moistened fingers. Darkness returns immediately, complete and enveloping, and I sit for a moment letting my eyes adjust once more. Gradually, the window becomes visible again, that pale rectangle admitting the faint starlight, and I can make out the vague shapes of furniture, the familiar geography of my small home. I lie back on the bed, pulling the blanket over myself. The wool is slightly scratchy but warm, and I arrange it carefully, tucking it around my shoulders. The straw mattress conforms to my body, supporting me in the way that only a well-used bed can. I turn onto my side, facing the window, and settle into my preferred sleeping position, one that has evolved over years of nights in this same bed. Through the window, I can see a portion of the night sky, stars scattered across the darkness like seeds broadcast across a field. As I watch, the moon begins to rise, its edge appearing above the distant hills, growing brighter as more of its face emerges. The moonlight, when it reaches my window, is silver and cool, transforming the cottage's interior, making familiar objects strange and beautiful. Shadows shift and deepen, and the rough walls seem to glow faintly. My thoughts begin to drift, losing their sharp edges, becoming more fluid and dreamlike. I think about the seasons, how they turn in their endless cycle, each one necessary, each one bringing its particular gifts and challenges. Spring with its planting and hope, summer with its growth and warmth, autumn with its harvest and preparation, winter with its rest and renewal. I have witnessed this cycle 32 times, and each repetition has deepened my understanding of its patterns, its reliability, its essential rightness. The land endures, I think, while we who work it come and go. My father worked these same fields, and his father before him, and others before them whose names I do not know. Someday, someone else will plough these furrows, tend these crops, live in this cottage. The thought is not sad, but rather comforting, a reminder that I am part of something larger and more enduring than my individual life. The work continues, the land persists, the seasons turn, and we are privileged to participate in this ancient cycle for our brief time. I think about the feast, about the faces of my neighbors lit by torchlight, their voices raised in song, their laughter warm and genuine. These people are my family, bound to me not by blood but by shared experience, shared labor, shared dependence on this land and one another. We survive together or not at all, and this knowledge creates bonds stronger than any formal agreement. We are a community in the deepest sense, our lives intertwined, our fates connected. The comfort of routine settles over me like an additional blanket. Tomorrow I will rise before dawn, as I did today. I will light the fire, break my fast, and go out to work. The specific tasks may vary, but the pattern remains constant, providing structure and purpose to my days. This routine is not a prison, but a framework within which I can live fully, knowing what is expected, understanding my role, finding satisfaction in meeting my responsibilities. The blessing of simple abundance fills my thoughts. I have enough, I think. Enough food to eat, enough clothing to wear, enough shelter to protect me from the elements. I have work that gives my life meaning, neighbors who provide companionship and support, and land that responds to my care with generous yields. What more could I reasonably want? The desire for more, for excess, seems foreign to me, almost incomprehensible. Sufficiency is its own kind of wealth, perhaps the truest kind. My breathing has slowed, deepened, falling into the rhythm that precedes sleep. My body feels heavy, sinking into the mattress, releasing the day's tensions. The aches in my muscles are fading, or perhaps I am simply becoming less aware of them. My thoughts continue to drift, but they are losing coherence now, fragmenting into images and sensations rather than complete ideas. I see the furrows I ploughed this morning, dark earth turning over, the smell of soil rising. I see the oak tree where I rested at midday, its branches spreading wide, its shade cool and welcoming. I see the feast tables laden with food, the faces of neighbors, the children playing, the stars emerging overhead. These images blend and shift, becoming dreamlike, losing their connection to actual events, transforming into something else. The moon has risen higher now, and its light streams through the window more strongly, creating a pool of silver on the cottage floor. I watch this light with half-closed eyes, seeing how it illuminates the dust motes that float in the air, how it catches on the rough texture of the walls, how it transforms the ordinary into something magical. The boundary between waking and sleeping has become blurred, and I exist in that liminal space where both states are possible, where consciousness has not quite surrendered to dreams. A deep contentment pervades my being, a satisfaction that goes beyond mere physical comfort or the absence of pain. It is a rightness, a sense of being exactly where I should be, doing exactly what I should do, living exactly as I should live. This feeling is rare and precious, and I recognize it as such, holding it gently in my awareness, not grasping at it, but simply acknowledging its presence. The night sounds continue outside, crickets, the distant owl, wind in the trees, but they are growing fainter, or perhaps I am simply hearing them less clearly as sleep approaches. My thoughts have become fragments now, disconnected words and images that float through my mind without pattern or purpose. The day, the work, the feast, the stars, the land, my father, the seasons, the cycle, home. My breathing has become so slow and deep that I am barely aware of it, an automatic function requiring no attention. My body has released its last tensions, lying completely relaxed, heavy and still. The moonlight continues to stream through the window, but I am no longer watching it, my eyes having closed at some point I cannot identify. The cottage, the bed, even my own body seem to be receding, becoming distant and unimportant. Sleep rises around me like water, gentle and irresistible, and I do not fight it. There is no reason to resist, no unfinished business demanding attention, no worries to keep me wakeful. The day is complete, its tasks accomplished, its pleasures enjoyed, its lessons learned. Tomorrow will bring new work, but tomorrow is not yet here, and tonight belongs to rest, to restoration, to the deep peace that comes at the end of a good day well lived. The last coherent thought that passes through my mind is one of gratitude. For this day, this life, this place, these people, this land that sustains me and gives my existence meaning and purpose. Then even this thought dissolves, and there is only darkness and silence, and the profound stillness of deep, restful sleep, my breathing barely audible, my body completely at peace, my mind released from all concerns, drifting into dreams as gentle and peaceful as the day that preceded them, leaving me suspended in perfect rest, ready for whatever tomorrow may bring, content in this moment, blessed by simple abundance, held by the land, part of the eternal cycle, home.